Hello everyone, and here's my guide on how to build a very efficient base in Palworld. This guide will be useful for people who just started playing, and for people who have been playing for a long time, so make sure to stick around for the whole video. The first thing you're going to want to figure out is the location of your base. The location of your base stems from the replacement of the PAL box, and if we walk away from it, you can see that there is a thin blue line that goes around the base in a circle. This is the location of your base where you're able to place stuff down. And why it's important is because you want the most flat land possible just so that you don't have to run into any issues like I do. For example, my problem is that I placed my PAL box too close to these cliffs, and because of that, there's a whole bunch of this unused space that I have. And my pals can't really get to this location. It's really difficult for them. They would have to climb through over the ranch over here and through here to get access to this spot. So this is kind of unusable territory, which is why when you're placing it, you want the most flat land possible so that you don't run into the issue like I have. And in the early game, you only have access to one base at a time. So I really recommend finding a place that has the most flat land and a place that looks enjoyable to you. So when you're building your base that you really want to power up, really want to build the meat of, having a ranch, having farms all over the place, make sure you follow these steps so to not make the same mistakes as I did. The second point is the placement of your specific farms and items. In my base right now, it's a good amount of hilly terrain, so it's pretty difficult to place some of these farms. Like, it took forever for me to actually be able to place this ranch here. But that's not the only thing. Flatland is really nice to have so that you have an easier time placing it, but also you want it so that your pals have access to these places really easily. For example, if I had all of my PAL beds stored at the top of this cliff over here, they wouldn't be able to have access to it so that they would never sleep, causing them to get a whole bunch of medical issues and making the game even harder for you. So make sure when you're placing your items, like your farms, your ranch, your beds, that your pals have easy access to them. Another important note is that you can only move things by destroying them and replacing them. So when you place them down and build them up, make sure that it's a location that you really enjoy and that your pals have access to, because that's the only way of moving them. Hopefully in the future they create some sort of move function so you can move your stuff around, but as of right now in version 1.3.0, they don't have that. So make sure when you place it that you're extra careful. Important note number 3 are farms. Farms are the most important part of a base, and building them right is the difference between a good base and a great base. Right here, I have berry farms right next to a feed box so that they have enough food to eat. As you can see here, the berry farm is working really well as we have over 500 berries for them to continually eat, and they're producing more and more every second. To do this, you require specific pals that I'll go over. The first pal you're going to need is a pal that has the planting ability. An early pal that you can get is Gum Moss, and he's a really good one for this. After the seeds are planted, you're going to need a watering pal in order to water them so that they can grow. A good early pal for this is Pangullet. And lastly, once they're fully grown, you're going to need a gathering pal in order to gather the berries. A good early pal for this is Vixie, and I also will recommend getting a bunch of these because Vixies are very strong in the early games. Another early food farm involves the ranch, and all it involves is a chickpea, which can be found really easily at the early game. Chickpea has the ability to sometimes lay eggs at a ranch, which can also be used for food. You can have both going at the same time, so you can have a bunch of berries being planted and have a bunch of eggs being laid in order for you and your pals to both have food in order to survive. Just make sure if you're also using eggs at the ranch that you have a pal with the transporting ability so that they can transport it into the feed box. Farm number 2 is wood, and I'm also going to mix in the stone farm here. These are both unlocked in the technology tree at level 7, the logging site for wood and the stone pit for stone. In order to cut down some wood at the logging site, you're going to need a pal that has the lumbering ability. It's a little difficult to find these abilities in the early game, though I do recommend trying to find a lift monk because they are pretty good in having a bunch of different abilities that will help you with farms. Lift monk are a little bit more rare than the other pals that I've described, so here are the locations of which it spawns. They're still a little rare, but they're not super rare. And to mine stone, you're going to need to have a pal with the mining ability. And there are Captivia that are located in the same spots of Chickpea at the beginning areas of the game, so you can catch a few there if you want to start mining some stone. For my base, I was lucky enough to capture a Dinossum, and they have lumbering too. With a higher level ability, they're doing their task at a higher efficiency, so it's better to have a pal with a higher level than having multiple of one level. One thing I really recommend is if you have a wood farm and a stone farm to have individual chests right next to them. And when you put a chest down, make sure to fill out the entire chest with stone so that only stone will be placed in here. Same thing with wood as well. Having these types of chests makes it so all your wood goes in one place and your transporting pals don't put it in random chests that are around. This storage idea can be done with other types of farms as well, so you could use it in a variety of different ways. The next farm I'd like to talk about is the ranch. I've already made a video about the ranch before, so I won't go into high details with it, but I'll give you the basic rundown. Vixie has the ability to dig up pal spheres and arrows at the beginning of the game, which are very useful. So make sure that you have a bunch of Vixies in the early game so that your ranch can dig up as many pal spheres and arrows as possible. Another important member that can be done within the ranch is also Mao. Mao digs up gold that you can use to buy and sell items or pals in the future. This is why the ranch is very powerful in the early games. This is my result after only having it on for about a few hours. We had nearly 5,000 gold, over 500 pal spheres, and over 200 arrows. I'll link my full guide for the ranch combo right over here, so you can watch that and get more details about the ranch. Though it's not quite a farm, the last thing I want to talk about is making sure that your pal's mental stability doesn't go down to 0. Having about 2 of the hot springs are really good at keeping your mental stability up for your pals so that they continue to work. This also makes it so they don't get injuries as often, which is really important. If you have a pal that has their sanity down and also an injury, they won't ever work, even if they're fully fed. So having multiple of these hot springs makes sure that that doesn't happen. Next part, I'm going to talk about what each of the pal abilities do. The first ability I'll talk about is kindling. Kindling normally comes with a bunch of fire pals. Kindling isn't really used in the early parts of the game, though when you're starting to need ingots and ore, you're going to need to smelt it. And for smelting, you're going to need a pal with kindling. The next ability is planting. Planting comes with most grass pals, and what planting does is that it takes the seeds from crops like wheat and red berries and plants them so that they can be watered and eventually turned into other crops. The next one is handiwork. Handiwork is really good to have a few pals of because once you're building something, they will also start coming and helping you build it. They can also be assigned to build something that you're not building while you build something else, so that you have multiple things being built at the same time. But if you're all working on one thing that you're building, the time that it takes to build it goes down drastically. Next is lumbering. Lumbering is only used for the logging sites so that you can cut down trees and get a bunch of wood. Next is medicine production. Medicine production is used when you're trying to build medicine. You need to have a medicine production pal on the site or in your party being out in order to craft them properly. So if you're trying to craft any sort of medicine with the medicine crafting table, then you're going to need one of these pals. Transporting is the next job. Transporting makes it so that any pal can pick up items and deliver them to a chest so that you're not being flooded with a bunch of items lying around your base. On the same pal, we also have watering. Watering makes it so when a seed is placed in a farm that they can be watered so that they can eventually grow. Next one is a very late game skill, though will be important in the end game, and that's generating electricity. At the end game, there are a lot of machines that can be built that require electricity to be powered, and having a pal with generating electricity is important to have those actually work. This comes with the majority of electric pals. The next ability is gathering. Once a crop has been planted and watered, they then need to be gathered so that they can be placed into a feed box so that they can be used to feed your pals or yourself. Next, similar to the lumbering ability, we have mining. Mining is used for the stone pit in order to create and generate stone for your base. The next ability is cooling. Cooling is, in my opinion, not very important, especially if you have a bunch of farms working to generate you a whole bunch of food, though sometimes it could be important. What cooling does is that once you have an ice box created and you put food inside, when you have a cooling pal, it will make it so that the food does not rot in a very fast way and that you can have more food that lasts longer. And the last one is farming. Farming comes into play when you have a ranch placed down, they have a special effect. For example, Vixie digs up pal spheres and arrows when it's placed in a farm. And that's all the pal abilities. So having a good selection of pals is important in order to have a very efficient base. And the last point is to level up your base. Leveling up your base does a few things. One, the higher level the base, the more pals that can work at a base, making it more efficient and making you able to do a wider variety of things. But I also really recommend in the early games to get your base to level 10 as fast as possible, because once you get to level 10, you can have 2 bases active at the same time. And the reason why it's important to have more than one base is for 2 reasons. One, in the late game, you can have multiple bases for doing very specific farming. And the other, and more important in the early game, is, for example, if you go out from your base and have an adventure collecting items, capturing POWs, going through dungeons, and then you figure out that you're out of POW spheres, out of arrows, and your tools are broken, and you need to get back to your base, you can quickly put down a POW box wherever you are, build it, and then teleport back to your base to recuperate and gather all the items you need, and then teleport back and dismantle that base in order for you to continue adventuring. That is why I think it's one of the more important things is 1, you get more POWs to make your base more efficient, and 2, you'll be able to teleport around more and have an easier access around the world. In the description of this video, I will place an article link that will explain what you need to level up for each level of the base. But that is my guide on how to build a base in the early game of Palworld. Thank you so much for watching the video and making it all the way here. If you liked the guide, please let me know by subscribing to the channel. There will be more Palworld guides and Palworld content in the future on this channel. Also comment what other guides I should make in the future. That's all for this video today, and I hope I see you next time. Goodbye!